It is great to be here. I come here about once a month, but we meet downstairs for cluster. Most months we're here, and I appreciate us being able to meet here with our group of pastors. It's a great source of encouragement. And as Pat shared with you, we've grown deep in our walk together with the Lord in ministry as friends and colleagues, and being able to share our lives. And I've learned a lot from Pat in the past few years that's been very helpful in times of challenge. So I am very glad to be here. I switched roles at Coons Lake in January, moved from 28 years of being, or 27 and a half years being senior pastor to now associate pastor, still full-time. But it frees me up to speak at some of the churches, especially those churches where the pastors are involved with cluster, and I'm enjoying this opportunity. Pat asked me to come and share, and I thought it was such a great opportunity. He says, well, we're preaching on the 7 deadly sins, you get gluttony. And actually, I think I figured it out myself as I was looking at the book. And so here I am, 11 days before Thanksgiving, with the special privilege of preaching to you about gluttony. But my desire for this is not to be something of condemnation, but great encouragement. I grew up hearing over and over, bet you can't eat just one. Does anybody know the rest of it? What is it? Lay's potato chips. And then there was another, and I was thinking about some younger people. They probably don't know these things from the 60s and 70s, so I'll give Sarah permission to roll her eyes at me, not that she ever does that to her father. But another one that I was thinking about, I can't believe I ate the whole thing. This came in 1972. Alka-Seltzer. And then right on its heels was Plop, Plop, Fizz, Fizz. Oh, what a relief it is. Another one with Alka-Seltzer. And then its competitor had to come out with, how do you spell relief? R-O-L-A-I-D-S, Rolaids. Now, you might realize all of these things have had these catchy phrases have to do with can't eating just one, or possibly eating too much, and what am I going to do about it to feel better? Even one of the commercials for Lay's potato chips, it was a man in a red suit with horns saying, I bet you can't eat just one. And the interesting thing about that kind of food is some studies have come out that it is true, once you eat one, you want to eat the whole bag, because they're designed that way. They have that special combination of salt and fat, and it hits that reward circuitry in our brain and introduces like just these artificial cravings. So not only do we struggle with the temptation of the ages to overindulge ourselves, now the very foods we eat, some of them are designed to help us do that even easier. So what is this solution? What truly is gluttony? And we even think about that these potato chips are really a lot like drugs. They affect our brain. But outside of that, what does the Scripture have to truly say to us about gluttony and what it is? Proverbs chapter 4, verses 23 through 27, I believe is a foundational verse for this sermon this morning. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. And I'm going to read the rest of that context. You have this verse on the screen. This first verse on the screen. Keep your mouth free of perversity. Keep corrupt talk from your lips. Let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. Give careful thought to the paths for your feet, and be steadfast in all your ways. Do not turn to the right or left. Keep your foot from evil. So what do we turn to when we're not keeping heart? And this is something that has really been a part of my life, keeping heart, knowing my heart. and something Pat and I have spent a lot of time with in the last several years in talking about. But all these different behaviors that you're learning about, temptations, these realities of life, are rooted in the heart. So what do we turn to? What do you turn to when you're not keeping heart? When you're not guarding your heart? When you're not feeding upon the Word of God or letting it even, maybe you're reading it, but it's not ruling your life and guiding your steps along the way of life. Think about food in regard to temptation. First of all, in the very fall of human beings in the Garden of Eden, the temptation was around food. Eat of this fruit. God had given them all the fruit they needed or ever wanted. It would satisfy them in that garden, but Satan convinces them that God's holding out on them, that there's something else even better. And they took that fruit and they ate it, wanting to be like God. And in the end, brought upon themselves guilt, shame, and the need for the love and redemption of God, which God has been prepared to do throughout the ages. But how do we get from that place in the garden where we have this dissatisfaction, and they weren't even born with the sin nature. They were convinced that there was something more. And there's so many parallels between the first chapters of Genesis and the early chapters of the Gospels that you can see. In the beginning was the Word, we're told. And in the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, you see the story of Jesus' temptation. And one of Jesus' temptations was turn this stone into bread. To use his strength, his power for self-serving ways. And Jesus did not come to serve himself, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. Proverbs 23:20 and 21 says, do not be among drunkards or among gluttonous eaters of meat, for the drunkard and the glutton will come to poverty, and slumber will clothe them with rags. So this is wisdom for life from Proverbs, but it shows us the way. And the beginning of wisdom, we learn, is the reverence for God. And so if we're not having that faith and reverence, we're trying to feed our own souls. And what we come up with is a distortion of good things. Food was given to us for the body to nourish us. Is also given to us for enjoyment. Frederick Buechner said, a glutton is one who raids the icebox for a cure for spiritual malnutrition. Let me read it again because that's a very foundational definition. A glutton is one who raids the icebox for a cure for spiritual malnutrition. Proverbs has some pretty drastic verses. I read this one with our midweek Bible study last week, and one of the men looked at me just like, that is pretty terrible. Proverbs 23:2, put a knife to your throat if you are given to appetite. Well, let's read that the way we read the Sermon on the Mount about gouging out your eye or cutting off a limb. And so when you think about this, put a knife to your throat, realize this is something that needs to be dealt with in our lives. That it really goes deeper. Proverbs 25:16 says, if you have found honey, eat only enough for you, lest you have your fill of and vomit it. Another very blunt, graphic proverb. And think about this. If you have found honey, eat only enough for you. You see, there's a community aspect to gluttony as well, that this involves thinking of others. There is just kind of in the background of this proverb, this idea of eating just enough for you. Remember, there's others that could enjoy this as well. I don't have this verse on the screen, but as Psalm 78 recounts the history of Israel when they were in the wilderness, it says they in 78:18 they tested God in their heart by demanding the food they craved. They were complaining about the manna, and then God gave them quail, and it was just an overabundance even that they were getting sick. Philippians 3:18 and 19. For many of whom I have often told you, and now tell you, for many of whom I have often told you, and now tell you, even with tears, walk as enemies of the cross. Their end is destruction, their God is their belly, and their glory is their shame, with minds set on earthly things. Their God is their bellies. Their God is their appetite. That's their idol. There's so many idols and things we turn to. Every one of these things you've been studying over the few weeks you've been in this series are really ways we try to cope with life, and they're ineffective and lead us into sin. So if you're dealing with anger, the scripture says, in your anger, do not sin. Anger is a reality of life. In our fallenness, we turn that anger either inward to depression and just sink farther and farther in it, or in our fears, we're raging. In our anger, we're not to sin. And so when we keep heart, we're listening to the voice of God, and we're living in humility and acceptance, repentance. But here's a description. Their God is their belly. We're reminded that our body's a temple of the Holy Spirit. Romans 13:14, but put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh to gratify its desires. Now I have a kind of a definition broken down here of gluttony, and it uses the word fresh. It uses the word fresh, and here is a picture of gluttony. As we kind of look at the scriptures we've just studied and say, okay, what does this mean day by day for me? And some of these words might not be in our everyday language, but they kind of flow out of church history. To practice gluttony is to eat fastidiously. C.S. Lewis gives a picture of this in the Screw Tape Letters, where there's a tempter and a junior tempter, and they're talking about the young man's mother and how she is gluttonous in this way, that she wants tea, but it has to be just so. She wants a little piece of toast, and it has to be just right. Not toasted too much, not toasted too little, the tea not too warm, not too cold. And if it's not just right, she'll send it back. It's sort of like when you go out to eat and then there's that person that gets their food, and I'm not talking about something atrocious like the steak I got that was glowing in the dark one time and not cooked. Now, that's something you may want to send back. But I'm talking about having it just so. Just so. And you're very, very hard to please, if not impossible to please. The vice of gluttony names a habit of the heart. Its routine quest for gratification, what did I say? That's combining two words, excuse me. Gratification wears a groove in our character. And I want to add, it not only wears a groove in our character, but science shows us it wears a groove in our brain. Accustoming us to disordered desires, but because we can't see other people's hearts and habits and thoughts, we tend to identify sinful tendencies solely on their behavior. It's disordered desire that comes out sometimes as eating fastidiously, ravenously. That's just eating as though this is your last meal, and picture of it is without concern for other people. Some of you have heard, I'll tell his name, Russ from our church speaks for the Gideons, and he's a wonderful man, and he loves to cook. Russ is one of those guys that has so many interests. He's just got interest in everything, it seems like, and everything he's interested in, he just does with great passion. And one of those is making soup. Or he has a passion for root beer. He did a whole history of root beer, and we had a root beer tasting. It was so much fun. Well, when he worked at a plant here in Plymouth, he made soup for his coworkers. And the first person in the line took the spoon and strained out all of the little mini sausages from the soup and ate them for himself. And the rest of the people got broth and whatever else was in there. So if you want a picture of eating ravenously, that's that picture. I was telling that story to my son and daughter-in-law yesterday, and my daughter-in-law started laughing about when she came home from the hospital. She had all these meals heated up, and a family member had taken one of the meals out, which was meatballs and had some pineapple and other things in it. And by the time everybody else got it, all the meatballs were gone. So that's eating without concern for others. It's all about me, all about my satisfaction. Very close to this is eating excessively. And once again, when we think about eating excessively, we're thinking just about ourselves. Eating sumptuously is wanting the richest and the best. It's close to fastidiously, but this is just this desire for the best, always the best. And in our culture, this can be a great temptation. There is a place for the best, and we're going to get to that in a moment. There's a place to enjoy wonderful foods. That the Bible is filled with stories about feasting and even commands to feast. Gluttony is not directly opposed to feasting, because feasting is not a sin. Feasting is celebratory gathering. As a matter of fact, when we long for Jesus to make everything new in his kingdom, years ago I saw this picture of a table that seemed not to end. The wedding feast of the Lamb. And so there is a feast awaiting us, but it's every day wanting to eat sumptuously. And then this is something I especially struggle with, is eating hastily. Is anybody here familiar with the term shoveling your food? Well, that would be something I just have to watch in my life, to eat so fast that I'm not even enjoying it. There's that picture from Charlie in the Chocolate Factory of the little one, Augustus Gloop. She thinks I'm stuffed, but all that cheesecake is too wonderful to turn down. She just, whatever it is, the candy there at the factory, and it does not go well for Augustus. So what is the response to gluttony? How do we respond? I like this little sketch from Bob Newhart where a lady is pouring her heart out, and she's got this great fear of being buried alive in a box, and Bob tells her, as he plays the role of a psychologist, get out a piece of paper, I have 2 words for you, and write these down. And he says, stop it. And she writes them down, and what else? Stop it. And they keep going on this way, and she has supposed to have a whole hour appointment. Says, that's just all there is. Stop it. And finally, she's just like, there's got to be more. And he says, okay, I'll give you more. I'll give you a few more words. Stop it, or I'll bury you alive in a box. And so just turning back her fear onto her, but telling somebody just to stop it very seldom works. I'm not saying it never works, but willpower only takes us so far. White-knuckling, dieting the different ways we can diet. Dieting may be something good to do for health, but it's not the answer to gluttony, because a lot of times dieting is just obsession. You get so obsessed with food. And there may be a place for it for health reasons, certain foods we can or cannot eat. But this sermon is not about dieting, and it's not particularly about health, although practicing gluttony is very, very unhealthy. So as we think about this path to freedom, this path to freedom from gluttony, this remedy, from Proverbs 28:13 and 14 we read, "Whoever conceals their sin does not prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy. Blessed is the one who always trembles before God, but whoever hardens their heart falls into trouble." So admission, confession, is a part of the walk of the follower of Jesus Christ. To confess our sin, to confess our weakness, to confess this other God in our lives. That when we feel anxious and we're trying to control life and put up our defenses, and then it just doesn't work, and then we try to find some way to escape, food can be the answer to that. I look at just little cycles in my own life. For me, a lot of times the most tempting time to just stuff myself is Sunday night, especially on a full Sunday where maybe I've preached 2 or 3 times and led a small group and had a church meeting, and then I get home at night and I let down my guard and I just don't stop. And then I don't sleep well, and on and on. But to check in about what's going on in my heart, to recognize this temptation and sin. The Message Bible in this verse says, "You can't whitewash your sins and get by with it. You find mercy by admitting and leaving them. A tender-hearted person lives a blessed life. A hard-hardened person lives a hard life." And so you're recognizing the sin in you and the sin that you commit. You're also confessing to God the hurts done to you, the sin done to you. For the message of good news of salvation is the salvation from sin, not just our sin, but the sins that have hurt us and just the general ways of the world, the sin in the world. And so all of those things affect our heart. And all of those things can lead us to the cross. And I think of a particular meal that was given to us when Jesus said, "Do this in remembrance of me." And so Jesus gave us food, bread, and the cup to remember what the beginning of the healing of our heart, the love shown for us on the cross, how he poured out his life for us. And when we look at the cross and we've come to that point and said, "I'm a mess," in naming our weakness, our sin, our struggle, our poor way of coping, surrendering this, instead of trying to control and use all the different kinds of defenses, we offer our lives. The Message of translates Romans 12:1-2 this way. So here's what I want you to do, God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life, and this is why I like this translation. Your ordinary, everyday life, your sleeping, your eating, going to work, walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. Readily recognize what he wants from you and quickly respond. Unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God brings the best out of you and develops well-formed maturity in you. And then the acceptance of his grace to receive what he offers. As Jesus faced his tempter, And he said, "It is written, man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." The mouth of God, internalizing it. In John chapter 6, Jesus is trying to teach his disciples, and they're sort of fixated on the feeding of the 5,000. And when he starts talking about the bread of life, they just keep thinking about that miracle. But Jesus has come to offer them more. And he declares in John 6:35, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty." I'm the bread of life. And he refers to their ancestors eating manna in the wilderness. He's the bread that comes down from heaven, which anyone may eat and not die. The living bread. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. This bread is my flesh, which I give for the life of the world. And the verse that I would like to finish with is in scriptures that we'll look at today is Matthew 5:6. "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." Jesus has a blessing for people who hear the screaming inside, who know in their bodies and brains and feelings and souls that there's a gap between what is and what should be. Here's a promise for the people who hear the screaming inside. "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." Righteousness of things being right on the inside, right in our life in relationship with God and others. And the interesting thing about the Beatitudes, is sometimes we read them wrongly. We read them as commands as opposed to invitations. One author writes this: "Not only do I not see a command to make ourselves righteous here, as if we could climb up into the divine, I don't even see a command to make ourselves crave righteousness, as if we could generate such a desire by will. I think Jesus believes that the desire is already with us, and it just needs to be welcomed, uncovered, embraced. That's the subversive effect of blessing. It's not a command. It's a gentle invitation to stop filling our empty bellies with empty calories. It's an invitation to realize that we've been guzzling toxic chemicals in an effort to slake our thirst. If we stop for a moment, we may realize that though we have consumed so much, we're still hungry, we're still thirsty." And what we realize as we enter the path of transformation, what Jesus brings to us, the most valuable thing working in our favor is our yearning. Some spiritual teachers will even say that the yearning you feel is for God, the yearning you feel for God, that hunger and thirst, is actually coming from the opposite direction. In fact, God's yearning for you. Let's think about that phrase. God is yearning for you. For God so loved the world. For God so loved you that he gave his only Son. He already knows what we need. He already knows our hunger and thirst for things to be right. He knows we can't fix it. But he invites us, Jesus invites us, "Come unto me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." A couple flew to Haiti to adopt a little girl, and then they brought her home. And that night they had a celebration, and her eyes were big as the table was full of pork chops and potatoes and food, and She watched her new brothers take seconds, and all of a sudden she got very agitated and concerned. And now there was a language barrier, and her new adoptive mother, realized what was going on. Her parents had been killed in an accident in her country, and they began to realize she was used to not having, and concerned that there would be food for tomorrow. So her new mother, her adoptive mother, took her around and opened all the pantry doors and the refrigerator and assured her it's okay for her brothers to have a little more food, to enjoy this feast of welcome into their house, and that she was going to be taken care of. And so, whatever it is in our life, we can trust our Heavenly Father when we pray, give us this day our daily bread. And we can trust Him to meet our needs today, all of our needs, and trust Him for tomorrow. And so as we walk forward and seek God's remedy, the remedy begins in the heart. And then maybe there's some practical things that we do just for confession and examination. I read that fasting could be a solution to gluttony. However, I'm not sure I'm going to recommend that. Number one, it would be kind of bad because I'm not very good at it. Not that I've never fasted. But if you're having trouble with food consumption, that pendulum can swing from eating too much to anorexia and bulimia. So it's not about that. It's about learning to know your heart. Maybe it is writing down what you eat, when you eat, and just developing an awareness so that you're not eating ravenously or hastily, but to slow down. And then when we have a feast, if it's possible, to eat in community, to invite the lonely person to join us who may not have that privilege. And so that comes to celebrations, that God has given us the feast. Feast at the feast. Doesn't mean every day has to be a feast. Otherwise, the feasts lose a little bit of how special they are. And so if you have a Thanksgiving or gathering or two, be with the people who are there. Enjoy what you can enjoy in the food, but enjoy what we did earlier, the practice of gratitude in your heart, giving thanks to God. Practice saying mealtime prayers, beginning with gratitude or ending with gratitude, and finding the peace of God day by day, step by step. I'd like to close my part of this service, the message, with the full serenity prayer. And I ask that you would pray quietly with me as we present our hearts to God. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as the pathway to peace, taking as He did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that He will make all things right as I surrender to His will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with Him forever and ever in the next. And may God bless each one of you through Jesus our Lord.